Hello, everyone. Welcome to Limbo. My name is João, and today I have the pleasure to share my conversation with Matt Bateman. So Matt was one of those people that when he followed me on Twitter, I was aware of all the work that he was doing. I was aware of how much of a specialist he is on education. And a couple of years ago, he followed me on Twitter, and I remember like that being extremely important to me, which now looking back, it seems like it's such a small thing, but it goes to prove that small things can make a huge difference because having someone like Matt follow me was like, well, people will take seriously my ideas. And of course, maybe I didn't even show up in Matt's timeline, but just knowing that was really, really important to me back then. And so a couple of years after, here I am talking with him about a bunch of different things that I think you're going to love. So Matt is a specialist on education. He has built Higher Ground and a bunch of different other projects in education, especially focused on Montessori. One of the things that he said that really, really struck a chord was that, the way he became a specialist in Montessori, Maria Montessori, was he read everything that she wrote. And as he said, it turns out that if you read everything that not that well-known writer writes, you suddenly become a specialist. And of course, Montessori today is widely recognized, and her approach to education is practiced worldwide. But still, having Matt speaking about this was wonderful. We went in detail through his career and how did he got where he is, but also we talked about a lot about parenting and his approach to parenting and what are some of the things that he learned throughout his journey on education that kind of dictate the way that he tries to educate their children. We've also talked about artificial intelligence and how AI is going to be part of education and what is a relationship that we want kids to have with it. It was a very interesting conversation. I feel like you're going to enjoy this very much. So Matt is writing a book. He writes in a bunch of different Twitter accounts that are linked down below. So make sure that you follow him and follow his work. And yeah, also make sure that you follow our YouTube channel, leave a like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment, and do the same thing on Spotify. Finally, a quick note from our sponsors. The first one, the Socratic Experience, the school where I work on. We're trying to revolutionize education using Socratic method. You can know more about us at thesocraticexperience.com. Contexto, the nonprofit that allows for Limbo to exist. And then finally, the restaurant that gives name to this podcast, Limbo in Lisbon. If you're there, say that the old upstairs neighbor João send you there. Maybe you have a discount, maybe you won't. You'll be in limbo until you ask. That being said, I hope you enjoy my conversation with the one and only Matt Bateman. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Limbo. Today, I have with me Matt Bateman. Matt, thank you so much for doing this. How are you?
I'm great. I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm really excited whenever a guest has like a cool background, and I don't think that there's a cooler background than books. So thank you for that. It's something that I really enjoy. So let me ask you, what was your relationship? I've had this theory where people that really are great educators and built these amazing projects, usually they have a strong connection with reading. Have you been a reader all your life, or was that something that you ended up developing later in life?
I've been a reader all my life, definitely since late high school, certainly by college. I mean, I read a
Yeah.
lot as a kid. I don't know that I read a ton in middle school and high school. I spent a lot of time on the internet,
Yeah.
and a lot of that was like it wasn't just gaming and stuff. A lot of it was like reading and writing on forums and Usenet and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I my books are like the one kind of possession continuity that I've had since many, many moves and many life changes. But yeah, I've kept them all since college, and then I went to grad
Yeah.
school, and so yeah, I've
Yeah.
accumulated a lot of them. Yep.
Yeah. It's great. I always like to see people's libraries. And it's interesting that you mentioned I really enjoy reading. I only started to read also in college, and I did it like out of laziness. So I studied music, and I was trying to compose things, and all of them sounded exactly the same. And I went to a teacher and said, well, like he was a really good composer. I asked him like, well, why do you do it? Like, what's your inspiration? And he said, well, if you're writing based only on music, on the harmony rules, etc., without any kind of source of inspiration, they'll always sound the same. So I try to find outside sources. And I asked him, well, what do you use? And he was like, well, I read books. And I was like, that's what I'll do. And eventually, like, reading ended up becoming one of the most important things in my career. But yeah, so Matt, I've told you before we started to record, like, there's a bunch of different things that I want to talk about. But I think that a very good starting point is just for someone who isn't aware of you. And of course, I'll record an introduction to you, just going overviewing your role. But let's hear it from you. Like, can you guide us through your journey on education, and how do you end up where you are right now?
Sure. So, I mean, step phase one was I was always interested in children, and by always I mean like I did babysitting when I was 12 in college. I was always like the boy babysitter and the boy preschool assistant teacher. I worked in a preschool in college. I did a lot with developmental psych in college too. And so that's just been an ongoing thread. I don't know. I don't think I ever thought of it as a career. I always had a million
Mm,
interests, so it wasn't like I wasn't like, oh, like I don't want to do that. It just like my thinking about careers wasn't that clear
mm,
through my 20s. But then, I did a PhD in philosophy. I was a professor. My favorite part of being a professor was teaching, and that was like deeply transformative for me.
mm.
Teaching adult, you know, col- adolescent, however you
Yeah.
want to think of college students. I was a terrible teacher. And when I first started TAing, and I had very good students, this was at UPenn at an Ivy League school with like really bright, philosophy majors and philosophy curious students. And I was so introverted and so shy.
Mm,
Solving like the ability to run a section was like, I mean, some of it was like particular skills, like pedagogy, thinking about it. Some of it was just dumb, like, I'm going to do power poses in front of the mirror before class and like work up my energy so I'm not this mousy little shy guy. And
yeah.
it really, like, I think it changed my personality. Like, it changed how I interact with people.
Really.
Then I decided academia wasn't for me after some time as a visiting professor at another great institution, and was just like, what do I do now? I've done some stuff in tech. I've done some stuff in various creative pursuits. I also have this childhood experiences, and one thing led to another, and I went down the Montessori rabbit hole. I discovered Montessori really for the first time in my early 30s, kind of through this process. Fell deeply in love with her and her writings and her works. A lot of these books behind me are Montessori books, all those blue and white books on the top shelf. And I'm trained as a historian of philosophy, as an intellectual historian. So part of the way that I did that was I'm going to read all of her works and her epistolary and her
Mm,
letters and her critics, which not many people do. And so if you are intellectually curious and like read all of the works of a woman who wrote in the 19 early 20th century, the 1910s to 1950s, like all of a sudden you're an expert on something.
exactly.
But I was co-founding a company, Guidepost Montessori, Higher Ground Education,
Hmm.
that ended up growing into a huge Montessori school network. So there was a lot of practice as well.
Hmm.
Then I had two kids. I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. The 5-year-old is sick and home from school in the other room, so she makes a guest appearance. That is why.
That will be an
And
honor.
that just kind of further that whole journey has been amazing. It continues to be amazing. It's probably the most exciting part of my life. I love it. I've always wanted kids, so this is like it's everything that I hoped it would be and more. It's a lot harder than I thought it would be, but it's everything that I hoped it would be and more. And that's also just kind of deepened my practice and my perspective on what do children need, especially what do young
Mm,
children need, especially what do my children need. Every child is different, but it's really been validating and enriching of my general perspectives on parenting and child rearing and education. Like 3 weeks ago, so last year I left Guidepost to write a book. That book work is still ongoing. The book is on moral education. a few weeks ago, I started a job at GT School, which is a
Mm-hmm.
new school that runs, it's part of the same organization and same school network as Alpha School, which has been around for a while. But the new and exciting thing about Alpha School and GT School and that whole family of schools is that they use this cool learning platform called 2 Hour Learning that is extremely tech enabled, extremely digital, like unapologetically, like the kids are on screens for 2 hours a day each morning,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how they get their academics. And there's a lot of AI infusion, a lot of innovation that happens during that time. And then in the rest of the school day, the other 5 or 6 hours of the school day, they do not do academics. So it's this very delimited. It has certain analogies to the Montessori work cycle, the kind of Montessori 3 hour work period,
Mm.
where there's this period of intense concentration. There's this delimited time for academics, and then the rest of the day is like play games, open companies, like do other things that are important for growing up and important for life. And yeah, I'm really excited about that too. So I think that brings us up to
Yeah.
the present. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. I want to like maybe shift, pause on your educational journey, go back to your parenting one. So, and I was saying this before we actually started to record that one of the most inspiring type of content that I love on Twitter or on X or whatever is your posts showing your daughters and your actually your daughter going through either like a playground or something like that, and you always give it like this context on the way you're thinking about the way you're educating her. And I guess that one of the questions that I have, because people have said this to me all the time, working in education, like you end up developing a couple of ideas, principles that you feel like are important. And, not being a parent, one of the things that a lot of people tell me is, well, you have all of those ideas, but then once you're a parent, everything changes. And so I guess that my question to you is, after becoming like a dad, how much did your did your views on education changed, or on the contrary, they were strengthened? Like, what was the relationship between that?
Mostly they were mostly they're invariant. So
Mm,
mostly they haven't changed, but there have been. I mean, they haven't changed fundamentally. It's not like I've gone back and been like, Montessori, what was I thinking all these years? Like, the kind of basic approach has been good, but there have been a lot of things. Some of which are just like you. I mean, how much adaptation there is for a particular child, and adaptation doesn't necessarily mean you're throwing out your plan. It just means like the plan was always to adapt. You know, the plan was always to get to know
mm,
this particular child. They were always like it was always going to be the case that they're born with a temperament. They have an inner fire. They have agency from a very young age. They are trying things and doing things and making little choices, and they have personalities and different needs. Kind of how much different children need, within a framework, different children need different
mm-hmm,
things has been, if like for your own children, like who you know intimately. I mean, in some ways, you know your children better than you know yourself, just because you're so cognizant of their needs and their what changes from week to week, and it's just crazy, like how much kind of creativity and planning and thought goes into like what does my child actually need today? What is going on with him or her?
mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is I've been I mean Montessori died in 1952. And I've always thought there are things in the Montessori curriculum that should just be updated for the modern world. And by updated, I don't mean like completely changed, but just like, the range of practical life things that happen in an early childhood
Mm-hmm.
classroom. Practical life in Montessori is things like learning how to button a shirt, learning how to
Mm-hmm.
clean a table, like things like learning how to replace batteries in a flashlight,
Yeah.
there's things like that. But I mean, it's been way more than that at home with our kids. We've done a fair amount with our kids, especially our older daughter who's 5 now. Our older child is 5. My son is 2, so he's still
Mm,
a little bit. He's playing with technology a little bit, just like she did at that age. But I mean, my 5-year-old is reading and writing, and she's using ChatGPT, and she's like, I mean, she can type really well, and that whole kind of thinking about how to approach the modern world and the world of technology with kids has been a very much a creative journey involving lots of judgment and little mistakes and pivots and I mean mostly just excitement. So
Hmm.
that I guess was predictable, but I didn't really think about it that much until it started happening.
Yeah, no, that's such a great answer, and I love how you're mentioning like the adaptation to some of the principles around Montessori to the actual current state of technology. Let me stick into this chapter a little bit more around parenting. Like one of the things that I'm always curious about, whenever you're someone that is designing any kind of learning experience, usually people tend to value certain things. Like I want my kids after my class to be able to do X, Y, and Z, or I want them to value a certain thing or to have this principle or belief in mind. What are some of the things that you're trying to optimize in the way that you're educating your children? So are you educating for a specific skill, for a specific mindset, for a specific set of values? How's your personal approach to that?
So I'm definitely optimizing for what I think of as moral education, but moral education in a Montessori sense of normal education, not moral education in the sense of service learning or going to church or
Yeah,
doing like discussing ethics in a Socratic seminar, which
yeah.
I don't think is bad, but that's not the kind of core of what I'm doing. It's character development. It's developing a certain set of virtues and excellences. And I have very worked out views on this because I've worked in this field and I'm writing a book on it. But I think that there are four that come up in development that are really important.
Okay.
One is knowledge, the love of knowledge, the love of truth, quality of thought, the capacity to think. Like I think of this as a virtue. It's kind of virtue epistemology.
Mm-hmm.
Two is work, a love of effort, an ability to have purposes that one cares about, that accomplish real things, and that one expend sustained effort towards, and they get increasingly longer range over time and increasingly complex and interrelated with other purposes during time. So work is how I think about it, the capacity to work.
Mm-hmm.
The third is humanism, which I think of as a love of human nature, a love of human beings, a love of self, a love of other people, a love of society. And that is can be complicated because people can be bad as well as good, people can be mixed as
Mm-hmm.
well as, pure. And also because I mean, this is where a lot of the technology comes in because civilization is ever evolving. And what does it mean for my daughter to have a love of humanity and a positive relationship to the human world in an era of digital technology, which I think of as basically complicated and evolving, but I think of as basically a good thing. And kind of managing that and introducing her to that has required a lot of creative thought. And again, I think of this as a virtue. I mean, there are people who are like the Ebenezer Scrooge types, extreme at one end who like don't like people who are kind of or who are just cynical about society. I want her to grow up with a positive relationship to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one is agency, which kind of encompasses all of those things: the capacity to own your life, decide what your life is about, make choices. Really, it kind of all adds up to that: knowledge, work, and humanism. If you get all of those three things right, there's a little bit more to say, and you're at agency.
Yeah.
And that I mean, that's my framework. That's how I think about absolutely everything that I do with my children. Not in a simple, rote way, not like I like go through a checklist, but it's
Yeah.
just always in the back of my mind. It's like these are the things that I think you need to live a good life as an adult. Is she getting what she needs now to develop these things? Are we kind of giving her the rocket fuel that she needs to kind of like fully leverage her childhood into a great adulthood and make that as easy and enjoyable as possible for her
Mm-hmm.
and
First of all, that's
him
such,
and for my son. Yeah.
of course, that's such a great answer. Let me ask you something. Are these so? When did these four ideas start to formulate in your head? Like when did you realize, okay, so if I'm designing this framework to help build to basically educate my children and just to think about like their development, I need to think about these four things. Like when did that emerged?
Over the last 10 years, really
Okay.
in reading Montessori, working in the Montessori space. So Montessori has two really powerful ideas. I guess three really powerful ideas in this. vicinity. One is what she calls work. I mean, one is work. Sometimes what she calls normalization, the instinct to work. So the whole perspective on work and being purposeful and the love of effort and
Mm-hmm.
how that unfolds in childhood, I got from Montessori. I mean, everything good about what I say comes from her, and everything bad about what I say
Mm-hmm.
is not her fault. Like it's my kind of understanding and adaptation of her. But I mean, it's very very Montessori influence. She also talks a lot about independence. Montessori is very big about on independence, on what I've kind of translated into the notion of agency, because I think
Mm-hmm.
agency is just kind of, it's not fundamentally different from independence. It clarifies. People misunderstand independence, I think, a lot. Like, people think of independence as like you're doing everything by yourself and you're a lone wolf. And agency is more like, no, like you're not doing everything by yourself, but you're self-directing. You're not bound
Yeah.
to existing frameworks unless you choose to be. It's more about the locus of control and less about needing to do everything yourself. And Montessori did not think you needed to do everything yourself. And this is
Yeah.
just part of what I found to be clarifying, is to talk about agency in addition to
Mm-hmm.
independence. And then for humanism, I mean, Montessori is, again, she's one of the great thinkers on this topic. She doesn't use the word humanism. That's a modern
Mm-hmm.
word. She talks about interdependence. She talks about human solidarity. She talks about love of man, love of mankind, centering your heart on human greatness, on human excellence, not human flaws. So she's on and on about this topic. But she doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have a word for it, and that's always seems so important to me, especially now.
Yeah.
And people who write about Montessori and talk about Montessori don't often talk about this element of her work. How she, like, I mean, Montessori was very pro technology, and she's pro technology from the perspective of, I mean, in her lifetime, like electrification happened, the radio
Mm-hmm.
was invented, all these dramatic changes happened in the early 20th century. And every time they happened, she was like, this is proof of human greatness. It's just proof of, like, human excellence, human capacity to conquer nature. And she used this kind of language to make
Mm-hmm.
nature better for human beings. I mean, she thought of conquering nature as living in harmony with nature. She didn't think of those things as opposed.
Yeah.
And just that whole perspective, I think, in the 60s and 70s, especially when, just in the culture at large, and especially in the Montessori culture when it got reintroduced to America as part of the kind of second wave of progressive education in the 60s and 70s, that was not emphasized, and that was kind of lost. And so I've kind of made a conscious effort to seek that out in Montessori and bring it back and think about what it means in the digital age and the AI age and
Mm-hmm.
the kind of, second industrial revolution that we're living through.
Yeah. Once again, great answer. I feel like it's extremely important that we have people like you that, and like many other people who think about how can we have like these fundamental principles around education, around like helping people grow, helping people learn, and how can we have them in a way that transcends the current uh, technological reality, right? Which I feel like it's very hard because you need to be constantly tweaking it. But to have like this framework of, okay, I'm aiming at these four different things that transcend any kind of specific technology, I feel like it's extremely important. Let me go back to your, once again, your journey. You have this experience where you teach students, and you were saying that it kind of transformed you because you weren't a very good teacher. What, like, you mentioned the way you approach, like doing like doing all of the reading, doing the affirmations on the mirror or the power poses in the mirror, but like exactly how did you, what were some of the tools or tricks that you use in order to become a better teacher back
So
then?
I wasn't, so the tools and tricks that I used were mainly, it wasn't that I, like, read a great book on how to be a teacher, or
Mm-hmm.
went deep into the history of pedagogy and applied it to, like, running my discussion sections. It was more like, I mean, the kind of common sense things that I think a lot of teachers end up doing. It was like getting other teachers who I thought were good to observe my classes and give me feedback,
Mm,
and really heavily adjusting what I was doing based on what they were saying. Insofar as there was something more, a little bit more cerebral to it, I did think a lot about. I'm like, what am I even doing in these philosophy classes? Like, these are like philosophy, like intro to philosophy, intro to early modern, intro to ancient, or like more advanced philosophy classes on philosophy of science or philosophy of quantum mechanics. The various things that I was teaching, like most of these students, some like a small portion of these students are going to go on to do something like this professionally. They're going to be professional philosophers. For everybody else, what are they getting? What about the student who's like a business major or a stats major? Like what, like taking intro to ancient? Like, is this just for their curiosity? Like, what do I actually want them to get out of this course? And that was very helpful. Kind of thinking about, the jobs to be done framework. Have
I
you heard
don't
of
think I
this?
do.
I can't remember who came up with it. There's this framework of in terms of thinking about like different things in life and the world, but especially in business. Like, what is the job that this thing, this person, this service, whatever it is has been hired to do? Like, what is the job to be done? And I kind of thought, like, what is the job to be done of a philosophy class, especially of an introductory philosophy class? Like, what are people hiring that to do? What does success look like? And that was very clarifying for me. And I mean, and I, it varies a little bit by class, but I kind of came to the conclusion that it's not. People often say like philosophy is about critical thinking. It's just about like becoming more logical. And I was like, no, like philosophy is about learning the content of philosophy, which is relevant for various reasons, because philosophy is kind of everywhere in the world, and you actually walk away with certain knowledge objectives, and real not like knowledge objectives kind of deeply held, such that you're now sensitive to a bunch of things that come up all the time about worldviews, about disputes about ethics and epistemology and metaphysics that are otherwise subsurface. You have a greater appreciation for the range of possible positions on different ethical, moral, philosophical topics, and that like you get that by studying philosophy, by studying the content of philosophy, by reading people like Descartes and Aristotle and Plato, and like going deep and comparing them to your own views. And so, I mean, that once I kind of was clear on like what is this doing, it changed like the kinds of questions that I asked, how I framed the reading, when I gave a mini lecture, when I didn't, how I gave feedback on writing assignments. And I think before I did that, I mean, this sounds so embarrassing almost, but like, I mean, I was in my mid 20s, like doing a philosophy PhD, having been a philosophy major, like really deep on this path, and I didn't have a clear view on like what the point of all of this was, with respect to like the typical student. You know, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to write on philosophy and kind of do research in philosophy, but like, what were the like? Also, teaching was a big part of it, and like, what were these students getting out of it? And I just clarifying that was really helpful.
Yeah, thank you. So going back again to your journey, we need to talk about, of course, higher ground. Walk me through how the DAO project came about, and what was the motivation or the ambition behind it?
It was just so I was working with a handful of other people. There were like 10 or 12 of us who were actually working at another organization, and I think we were just increasingly aware of the opportunity. Like, Montessori pedagogy is so good. It's just so much better than anything else, especially in the early childhood space. It's amazing. And we just kind of felt like we have the fire of the gods. Like, even other people, like the things that we thought that we could do with it. Lots of people love Montessori, but we kind of thought like this is the solution. Like this is like this should take the world by storm. And because we were all kind of, or at least a lot of us were like, we were more startup culture, enculturated, and more kind of entrepreneurial minded, and more have more of a gray tribe bent. Like the natural way that that got channeled was not like, let's go into public school policy reform. The natural way that got
Yeah,
channeled was like, let's start a business. Like
yeah,
let's like make the Whole Foods of Montessori, the Starbucks of Montessori, or something like that. And there were that idea just crystallized and took off, and we were all super excited about it, about the things that we could do with the pedagogy, about spreading Montessori, about you know opportunities for innovation in the space. And so that was the kind of basic drive and impetus, was just like just a deep belief in children and a deep belief in the power of this educational philosophy to, like, if it were, like, if it was what we thought it was, like, like, it should take the world by storm. People should pay for it. Like, why does KinderCare exist? You know, like, it should just be like way bigger than it is. And so it was so exciting to kind of see that and believe that. It's still exciting.
Yeah. Where did that entrepreneurial mindset came about? Because usually, in my experience, the philosophy majors that I know aren't basically thinking about, well, there's an opportunity here. Let's set up a business and try to build that. It's kind of quite the contrary. And I'm making a generalization here based on my own
Yeah.
sample. Okay, like how did that come about?
I mean, it depends on what philosophies you're enculturated into. So
True. True.
there is a kind of rich world of you know, pro agency, pro go out and do things, pro market, you know, thinking in intellectual history. Like, I'm very influenced by that tradition, including by people like Ayn Rand,
Mm-hmm.
who was very pro business. That didn't come from my PhD in philosophy, but that I mean, that's been a long-standing interest of mine. But yeah, I mean, it did, I mean, the I mean, in effect, your question is like completely fair, because like I wasn't the one driving it. Like, I think that I,
Mm.
like, in some ways I have the personality for it and I've learned a lot. But like the
Mm-hmm.
first couple years of that startup for me personally, I mean, thankfully I had a founder and a bunch of co-founders who were like way better at the entrepreneurial and business side and had a ton of
Mm.
experience in the school space and just like thought this 10 times more than I did. But like,
Yeah.
it was a trial. I mean, I was like pitching people for and fundraising, and like I had no idea what I was doing. It was like, 2 years of humiliation. Like I was really bad at it. And I approached it. I mean, I kind of threw myself into it, and I was also like, I'm going to read every business book out there, and like some of them are quite good. And but yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, the hard skills or the soft skills, I guess, the actual implementation skills, I had to learn. I learned from my colleagues, and I learned by doing. The kind of mindset I learned by having influence. Like, Paul Graham was a big influence on me in college. I read Hackers and Painters when I was 18, and
Mm.
like I was like, I mean, the way that he actually influenced me was not like I should go do a startup. The way that he
Yeah.
influenced me was like, you can write essays like this. You can just like, oh my god, like you can, like, you don't have to write on like you could write an essay on like what it's like to do a startup, or like how to make money,
Yeah.
or like things like that. And the essays can be extremely good and intellectual. And so that was how he influenced me. But that's always been kind of in the background, I guess. Does that answer the
Mm.
question? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, no, it does, it does, and it's great because I feel like one of the things that I've ended up, like I've had this conversation with some people from academia where they end up having this framework where if I'm going to jump into the business world, I need to be the one doing everything and fully understand it. And because I don't have the time or the willingness to actually learn all of that, I'll stick to this lane, even though I don't particularly enjoy it. And I love what I loved about your answer is this idea of, yeah, if you find people that have the knowledge, you can pair. Like, it's this idea of the agency is in the work of others, right, and in the greatness of others. And so by being able to have surround yourself with the best people, you get to build different things, and you don't need to go and just do it all by yourself. So you definitely answer the question. Let me then let's pivot then into one of the most important topics that I feel like we were going to be talking about, which is AI. And instead of going straight into GT school, I want to ask something. Like, I don't remember if it was you or your wife that posted on Twitter some of the conversations that your daughter was having with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I want to start there. Like, you were mentioning, like she already uses it. She types very well. She writes very well. And I guess that my question is, as a parent, like, what's the relationship that you're trying to make sure that your children have with AI? And then how about like, what's the view as an educator, and is that different?
It's not really different other than that. Well, let me just talk about the relationship that I want my kids to have to AI first,
Yeah,
and
of course.
then I'll talk about how it's different. So the fundamental is that I want her to have a positive relationship to technology, and that's part of humanism, in my view. I don't think that you can be cynical about technology and love human beings. There are a lot of things about I mean, I grew up on the internet, like in the early internet, like before the World Wide Web existed, like just barely before the World Wide Web existed and web browsers existed. And then it was with me throughout my whole childhood and my life as a teenager. And then as a college student, it's been like a major positive influence on my life. It's also changed a lot, especially in child targeted content in terms of how much is possible, how easily, in terms of kind of how prepackaged everything is. The gatekeepers, I mean, they're like the extent to which we like live in a world with no gatekeepers, and what that has done to content strategy. Like you are now competing for attention a lot. I mean, there's a lot of, I think, legit. Like I love technology, and I want my kids to have a positive relationship to it and a virtuous relationship to it. But there are a lot of risks out there. Like if I just put my children in front of YouTube Kids, like they will watch Coco Melon for like a month, and I don't think that it's very good, and I don't think that they're learning that much, and I think that it's actually agency deadening. Like with respect to my core values, it does not enhance anything. Now, just dipping our toes into AI a little bit. So there's various things I do to compensate for that. ChatGPT is new. We just like Gina just introduced her to it like a few weeks ago. So like we're experimenting with it. We're experimenting with like system prompts and like we're trying to train the like at first we were like this is a 5-year-old and it like started talking to her like a baby. It was like isn't this so exciting and like use all these smiley emojis. I'm like no, like we have to like train it almost like you train a babysitter or a Montessori teacher or something. But it just immediately solves a huge problem for me, which is that the internet is full of slop. And like if she's interested in Avatar: The Last Airbender, and she Googles Avatar: The Last Airbender, she will be given a bunch of crap. Some of it will be good, but like it's very hard to wade through what is actually relevant to her questions and interests that's good, and what's going to be like, an hour long reel of like 5-second Avatar clips, like that she hasn't most of which she hasn't even seen yet because she hasn't finished the show, and so on and so forth. ChatGPT, I can say like she's watched up through season 2. Please don't give her spoilers. This is a 5-year-old. Answer all her questions, and now she can access the entire knowledge base of the internet,
Without actually having
and
to
it will
go.
connect with her and at least attempt to talk at her level, and it sorts things for her, and she doesn't have to like it's curating the content and individualizing it for her. I mean, we'll see how I feel, in a month or 6 months or in 3 years. But like right now, I kind of feel like, oh my god, like this is like for a child who can type and who can write and read well, for a 5-year-old, like this solves the slot problem of the internet. Like she can get all the content and all the knowledge and all the information that she wants, and I don't have to worry about it being trash. Like it's basically agency enhancing. Like it's an agency enhancing filter. I also like that it's reading and not video. Like I mean there are skills that I want to build in her as well. So yeah.
Yeah. No, that's such a great answer because I feel like a lot of parents, especially when ChatGPT and LLMs started to become like mainstream, I watch a lot of parents say, "Well, I don't want my kids to use that." Even small kids like 7, 8, 9 years old, I don't want my kids to like use AI because I don't know, like they'll stop thinking from themselves and they'll basically allocate their thinking and their reasoning to these platforms, and that doesn't make no sense. And then I proceeded to see them handle them a smartphone where they basically went and saw like an hour video long of like these brain rot kind of uh, cars crashing into each other in like this animation thing, and it just made me like think about how there's almost like this idea that AI is this huge monster that's going to make kids stop thinking. So but that watching endless hours of content on YouTube that's basically designed to like give you that dopamine hit of wanting to see the next video and next video and next video without actually engaging with it, that seems like to be an healthy choice. And so I feel like one of the biggest misconceptions that a lot of people will have with AI is exactly that. Like it's easy to think or to fall prey into this narrative of, well, if my kid uses AI, he or she will stop reasoning, and it just and like like delegating his thinking into the platform. But there's a bunch of other elements that are corrupting their thinking, uh, that are okay, and I don't get that.
Yeah, I mean, so in the kind of, if you're kind of pretty deep in as a parent into the context of schooling, and if your child has anything like a typical relationship to school, I mean, one of the concerns is just like you're going to use AI to do every single homework assignment, and like you're basically going to use AI to cheat. Like you can't, like AI is really good at doing homework, and so I think that that's like if that's kind of like, even if that's not immediately what you're thinking about, if that's your kind of basic frame of reference, LLMs, I think rightly seem a lot it's like you're like you basically you're not like not going to school anymore. Like you're going to offload as much as you can to this. Whereas my context is like my child has lots of questions and they're exploring things. Like I just think about it in a very different way.
Yeah,
And then
makes
yeah, I
sense.
mean part of the advantage of ChatGPT as opposed to YouTube. I actually like YouTube like for my kids, but
Yeah, me
like
too.
I feel like I have to supervise it. Like I just like I can't kind of wander off, and there's no, it's really hard to get like a whitelist going on YouTube. And so like the algorithm takes over. Like it's very hard to kind of supersede the algorithm, and a lot of the stuff that the algorithm turns up I don't think is any good. There's tons of stuff that I think is great. ChatGPT I don't have to supervise. Like I can like log into the
Yeah.
account later and see what they're talking about and kind of make adjustments. You can use it independently. That's also a big deal to me. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, let's go into the way that GD School uses AI, just for people who aren't aware of the 2 hour learning program and what it entails. Can you give us just an overview of how the program actually works?
Yeah. It's not LLMs, just to kind of like reset expectations out of the gate. The older students at Alpha and GT do use LLMs for specific things, but that's not the kind of core of the 2 hour learning platform. The core out of the 2 hour learning platform is it's a suite of apps, and some of the apps you will have heard of, things like Math Academy or IXL or and what particular apps go into the platform is constantly evolving and being updated. 2 hour learning has a team that writes custom software, so it's definitely not all vendors. It's increasingly kind of built in house. Like there's apps like Alpha Read and Alpha Write that teach you how to read and how to write, that are just in house apps. So I mean, the kind of look of using the apps isn't that unfamiliar to any parent who's like used learning apps like Math Academy or Rocket Math, just for math facts. Rocket Math is like, have you ever seen Rocket Math? It's like there's a
I
rocket and
haven't.
like it gives you math facts like, like 12 times 3 and like you've got 3 seconds to answer and then it gives you a high score. It's like you're playing a math
Yeah.
video game.
Okay.
IXL is very standard reading content math software. What the platform does is it, through various trickeries and engineering hacks, including things like constantly screen recording the faces of the kids who are using the apps, along with constantly recording their screen and feeding that whole video feed into AI, like an AI video recorder. There's just lots of AI wraparounds and various things that assess, that kind of have a view, have a kind of have a 2 hour learning centric view as to, has this child actually mastered this content? Is this child learning this content? Is this child struggling with this content? Is this child distracted? So there's a kind of AI layer on top of the apps that evaluates how much is the child learning, how well are they learning it, and what should we tweak based on that? Like, is it that the child just is bored to death? Why is the child bored to death? Because they can't understand it, because they need to know something previously, because the teacher needs to come in and motivate them. Like what is going on? And the AI will help kind of at least surface that and sometimes diagnose it. So that's the kind of basic. Think of it as like a tech learning suite with like an AI system that's increasingly better at evaluating how effective the learning actually is.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. So walk me through, like, in your point, like, what do you think are some of the advantages of having that system? Like, why is it better than anything else?
I mean, there are two great advantages. So one is complete and total individualization.
Hmm.
You do not like the there are teachers involved in this learning. They're involved in motivating the students, and the students have calls with academic tutors when they do major assessments or when they struggle. But basically, fundamentally, the students are using the system independently. And from that perspective, it's the same as Montessori curriculum. Like Montessori curriculum is designed to, and maybe this analogy won't be illuminating because you need to understand what Montessori curriculum is. But Montessori materials are designed so that students can, like, the teacher introduces the student to them,
Hmm.
the child to the materials, and then the child can go and use that material for hours or like choose it on a different day or whatever independently of the teacher. So it no longer requires the
Yeah.
teacher to come in and set it up and tell you what the problem set is and explain things to you. It's enough of the pedagogy has been offloaded into the physical material that you can go
Hmm.
and do it yourself. It's the same principle behind 2 hour learning. It's very, very independently usable. So that's advantage number. And that means students can go through it at their own pace. Like this is the there are second graders at Alpha who are like, doing high school math.
Hmm.
And like literally, like it's not an exaggeration. They're doing high school math, and and they might only be in the fourth grade and reading or something like that. There's just the amount of personalization that happens is just amazing because you don't have to have the whole class sitting in desks and listening to the teacher talk about the same thing at the same time.
At the same
You've kind
time,
of
yeah.
decoupled the teacher in front of the classroom model. So that's thing one. Thing two is the standard is really mastery learning. So
Hmm.
there's this idea in education, old idea in education, but very, very rarely implemented. So mostly in education, like you go through the material, like time is constrained and mastery is variable.
Yeah.
This is how various people put it. I think this is how Saul Kahn puts it. Time is so you go through the material at a certain pace, and some students master the material and really get it.
Some
Some students
others.
master it really quickly. Some students don't, and then you move on. And so what's varying in the learning is how much you actually know.
Hmm.
In mastery learning, mastery is the constant and time is the variable. And so some students, it takes them like 6 extra months, like you're dyslexic or you're just not motivated or, for whatever reason, like it takes you 6 extra months to read or 2 extra years to read. Fine, like keep practicing the stuff until you learn your basic phonics. Or like it takes you, like some students like get their math facts instantly and some students really have to drill them. Like that's fine. Like the mastery learning says like take as much time as you need, but don't stop until you've really mastered it. In
Yeah.
mastery, there are in the 2 hour learning platform very high standards for mastery, like higher than like one of the tweaks is like if the students are using IXL or Math Academy or whatever, like there's a default level at which the system will say you have mastered this. It's time to move on, and we are very opinionated about like no, like you've got to go like you've got to double that. Like you've got to you've
Yeah.
got to get a higher score to count as mastery. The combination of those two things, like you move on when you've really mastered it, and total independent learning, like total independent individualized learning pace, is very powerful. Like it's very, very powerful, and it means that
Hmm.
students can just sit in front of a screen for 2 hours. It's really efficient. It's really effective at going through it, and they learn at the pace that they're going to learn. And that's it. Like it just there's no a lot of the fat is cut from the educational day, and it's just much more effective. And so, I'm I mean, I've been at this job for 3 weeks, but I'm very excited about the combination of these two things. They're very consonant with things that I've believed in education for a long time. And I think that they work, and I think that we have the results that show that they work. So, yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you something, taking a step back, which is, do you think that, and this doesn't have to be related specifically with, GT school, it can just be your opinion as an educator. Do you think that using AI as a way to, um, like, as a big part of the educational journey of a student. Do you think that that's a good idea for every single student? Do you think that we should be wary of what kind of student is interacting with AI or not? Do you think that it's just a good tool in general? Like, what are your thoughts on this? Because one of the things that I feel like it can happen is if we get a sample of people that, students that are highly motivated with a high sense of agency, and we give them any kind of AI tool, like, I feel like those people will have very good results. I'm One of the discussions that I've been having with people is, okay, well, if you give an AI suite to a kid in like a very rural area of Portugal, will the benefits be the same? Or is it that in that case, there's something that needs to happen before you actually integrate AI in their educational journey? So, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, by AI, do you have in mind like chatbots?
Any kind of tool. So of course it depends on the tool, but we can either talk about suites, we can talk about LLMs, we can talk about chatbots or platforms like Khan Academy or MathSpace, etc., that use AI in a way to generate like better challenges for students. But do you think that it's I guess my broader question is, can we state that AI as a tool for education is something that's valuable to every single student?
So, I mean, the most obvious thing that it strikes me to say is that so AI doesn't and in general edtech doesn't solve is not very good at solving problems of motivation.
Mm.
So in my experience as an educator, motivation is very personal. It
Mm-hmm.
is often inextricably social, or if it's not social, it's best kind of modulated
Mm-hmm.
and increased and channeled in a social context.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the effort at Alpha and GT, I think rightly goes into like what are our educators doing? Like what is their relationship with the
Yeah.
students? What do they do with the student who's demotivated? What do they do with the student who's struggling? What do they do with the student who just wants to get through the material as quickly as possible? Is that good or bad or not? What kinds of judgments are being made about that? I think if you take that away, I don't think that the system works for most students. There will
Mm.
all, I mean, as you said, there are kind of independent, there are self-driven learners, there are high agency students, the kind of top, I don't know what percent, top 10%, top 5%, top 1%
Yeah.
of students in terms of kind of natural agency, motivation, self-discipline, kind of curiosity. In that respect, will be able to use the system to great effect and benefit from it. But in general, I don't think it's going to be that effective absent some sort of really robust motivational system. And by robust,
Yeah.
I mean like even just something like a person that sits next to the child and talks to them and like figures out what makes them tick and you know and incentivizes them and negotiates with them and pitches them and sells them and just like contextualizes everything socially like with a human
Mm-hmm.
touch.
Mm.
I think that that's pretty important. I mean,
I love that.
I do think that the future of education is I do think that AI is in a sense a universal tool and that the future of education is going to be everybody's using it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the future of human life is that everybody's going to be using it constantly all the time. Like I think that the best analogy is like spreadsheets.
Mm.
Like if you think about life before VisiCalc came out, I mean now Google Sheets and now Excel, what has become the kind of spreadsheet universe for a lot of different projects, whether it's data collection, whether it's operations, whether it's accounting, whether it's just keeping track of a project. I mean, there's all sorts of things, just like whether you're doing a lot of math, just like anything where you're cranking through
Mm.
like a bunch of spreadsheets are like the power tool. Like, I mean, the world runs on Excel and Google Sheets, like including like Fortune 500 companies and your local
Yeah.
church and like, Little League. And I mean, it just, like it's such a power tool. Like LLMs are like at that level, but for a different range of problems and work. Like everybody's going to be
Mm.
using them, and to that extent, I do think that it's incumbent upon educators to think about like how do we educate people on using them? Like
Mm-hmm.
what's a young person's experience with them? Are our learning structures set up so that their most likely experience with chatbots is going to be to cheat on an essay, or is our learning experiences set up so that their most likely way to deal with to interact with this AI is going to be to do something amazing, to do something spreadsheet like
Yeah.
and creative and productive where they're really learning. Like, I mean, these are unsolved problems right now. So, and
Hmm.
there are a lot of risks. So, basically, my answer is, what's the motivation of the student? How are humans shaping the motivation of a student? And then this is new territory. Like it's
Yeah.
the future, but it's new territory.
Yeah, thank you. And let me, like, you mentioned the human element in there, and I guess that's one of the things that I'm more curious about. Like, I'm finishing this essay on some of my own beliefs around AI and educating, and one of the things that I have this experience where in two two or three different projects, like when ChatGPT was a thing and using LLM started to become a mainstream thing. I've had people ask me, well, aren't you afraid that it's going to take your job? Like, because knowledge no longer matters because you can use any LLM to explain any kind of concept in 10, 10, 20, 30 different ways until a student gets it. So why, like, what's your purpose in the classroom? And I've been pretty dismissive of that view because, as you were saying, like, I believe that a big part of this education is the emotional landscape that the learning experience provides, and that emotional landscape is uh, tied, I believe, to having a guide. I wouldn't call it a teacher, but having a guide or a learning coach or whatever you want to call it, helping the student contextualize. You were saying, like, contextualize everything socially, doing that work where you learn with the technology but then you contextualize it or you actually apply it with the help of a human being. But I would love to understand, like, you, especially because you're working on a school that it's implementing AI at its highest level, like, what do you think the role of the teacher guide learning coach will be?
I definitely think that pedagogue and subject matter expert. So, like, if you think of, like, I don't know, 50 years ago, even before VisiCalc, before there was a computer in almost any classroom, like if you're like a sixth grade math teacher, like you've got to understand the math and you've got to understand something about math pedagogy, even if it's not a cutting edge understanding. Like you need a perspective. Like maybe you'll get a trial by fire, like I did, but like your job is to teach algebra to these students and to remediate the students who aren't even ready to learn algebra and to somehow figure out for the students who are more advanced how to challenge them. But basically, it's to like you have a curriculum, you have a textbook, you're going through it, and you need to understand it. Like if a student has a question about I don't understand what's happening even with systems of equations, or what does it mean to rationalize like the conjugate? What is the conjugate that you're multiplying, that you're rational? Like there's all sorts of things that come up as a teacher, and you've got to know the
Mm-hmm.
answers. I mean, that's a big
Mm-hmm.
part of being a teacher is like you can't just say if you're a good teacher, or at least you can't always say, figure it out yourself or go read the textbook. Like you've got to
Yeah.
give individualized explanations to students. That's part of the job of an educator, and that you and you also have to at 50 years ago be exciting, be enticing, motivate the students, incentivize them, like make the learning real to them. Like that's part of it too. Like part of your job, part of the job of an effective teacher is to sell your subject matter, to individualize motivation, to kind of make it exciting. So both the knowledge and the subject matter expertise and the subject pedagogy and the motivation and the relationships with the students are all wrapped into one job.
Mm-hmm.
I think that part, what in general, what advances in curriculum do is they decouple the role of the coach and the role of the subject matter expert from the role of the subject. Like those two
Mm-hmm.
things are like increasing, like, and this is true of tech for sure. It's very clearly true of AI, but it's even true of like Montessori materials. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're like really like a good book. Like if a student is reading a good book on a subject, like that's material that they don't need to get from a teacher insofar as they understand it. Like what it
Yeah.
means to have good content and good curriculum and good exercises and good practice routines that you can read about or look up or repeat, and that you have some sort of feedback mechanism that isn't just the teacher, is like you are no longer dependent on the teacher for your learning.
Yeah.
For the subject matter expertise, you still might depend on them for various things, for kind of like providing context or having a perspective on you as a person because you're young and you don't have a perspective on your whole life yet, or through managing through failure, or I mean, there's a million ways that human relationships come up, but yeah, I do think that tech, in a very broad sense of tech, decouple subject matter expertise and, and coaching, those two things. So that's that. I mean, AI makes that very, very obvious because the AI can act like a human.
Yeah.
They can answer your questions like a human, which is it's spooky. It's not to my 5-year-old because she's growing up with it, but to me, it's still spooky.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, there the thing to do is like how much good pedagogy can we get into the AI such that it answers your questions really well. The way that you answer questions as an educator isn't always the same as the way you answer questions in life. So yeah.
Yeah, and it even allows for a couple of things that I feel like are amazing. Like one of the things that I did with my students at the Socratic Experience was we were reading like this textbook on quantum computing, and like we wanted to have the instead of us focusing on finding the answers. One of
Is
the things that I told them,
is it
yeah,
Andy's thing? Is it Andy Matuszyk's quantum computing project, or is this something else there?
no,
It's a
no, no.
tangent.
It was something else. It was something else.
Okay.
So what we wanted to do was we were reading the book. I forget the name of the author, and I could look it up. But the idea was like we're learning around quantum computing, and one of the things that like they picked this book that they thought that they wanted to read, and we were talking about like how would instead of like reading the book, how cool it would be if if we had like the actual person in there and have a
Yeah.
conversation with it. And so what
Yeah.
we did was, well, why don't we use AI to do it? And we've uploaded the book on an LLM, and we said, well, now we are acting as the author of the book, and we're having a conversation with you. So, and I feel like once again, as you were saying, like that decouple is it's evident. I guess that my question then is, let's say that someone is hearing this and they want to be like they want to be part of education, they want to go into education, and they want to help somehow, educate the minds of the future. What would your recommendation be in terms of the kind of things that they should be focusing on in order to become better educators now that the couple of things have happened? Like, what does the future educator really need to master that is new?
I do think that we're on a trajectory, we're on a kind of long term trajectory that has been taking place for a long time where the things that people call soft skills, though I don't love that term, are increasingly important in education. Just the kind of relationship motivational skills. I I think that it's still very early days for AI, and so I think that it will always be the human race will always need people who have good judgment about what counts as good instruction, and who have the capacity to create and deliver good instruction in various contexts. Even if AI gets very good at that, the human race will need people who can do that. And that is the other, I mean, the kind of pedagogical expertise and kind of how you, like, even if you're just a one-on-one tutor, like, I mean, anybody that's ever like, I'm going to be a math tutor for this 8-year-old and like they're struggling in math and like I'm just going to sit down with them and what do they need? Like there is there is motivational technique to that and there is skill to that, and that skill is also relevant for creating and assessing AI tools that that you're going to ultimately offload some of this to. I have used a fair number of math tutoring AI tools, and I was like, I mean, I immediately thought like a typical tutor is better than this. And there's a bunch of the tools will improve, but it's just like I would not. If I were an educator getting into it, I would not say I don't need to learn instruction. I don't need to learn pedagogy. Like the AI system is going to do
Yeah.
that. I would say like now is the time in the human race when we need to be very clear on what counts as good in this area before we kind of like crystallize a bunch of it into systems and
Offload it
institutions that
too.
become the new status quo. I mean, I think that there's a huge opportunity, especially since AI democratizes, coding and a lot of engineering and turns it more into natural language. There's a lot of like make a system prompt for ChatGPT that like has a lot of pedagogy built into it and see how it answers questions differently. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, now is the time to do that kind of experimentation and software development and building. So, yeah, I mean, I would definitely say don't be afraid. get your hands dirty, see what your students are actually doing, like run a bunch of experiments. I would not be afraid that you're ruining your students or anything like that. Just be a humanist about it.
Yeah, I would also add that I think that as we go along this path, as you were saying, like everything that somehow relates with the way with the relationship we have with students will really have a 10x impact on your capacity of actually building a connection with that student and then help him or help her out through the different challenges that they're going to face. Like one of the questions that I posed in the essay was this idea of like how prepared are you to help a student to deal with the frustration of having asked AI to explain it as a concept 10 times and still not getting it. And it's like if that's when the emotional aspect of dealing with that and helping them process whatever is happening really comes to play. And I feel like that's going to be one of the major things when it comes to education, where if can I look at the people that I have in front of me and can I build an emotional landscape, an emotional journey throughout my learning experience? Because I feel like a lot of times people didn't have to consider this. That's why one of the reasons I was talking about this recently with people from TSE, where one of the reasons I'm really happy about the fact that my educational journey started. I mean, it started off with younger students when I was playing music, but like the corporate training aspect of it, like 3 years where you're teaching companies, it's a very different experience from teaching in a regular
Yeah,
class.
yeah, for
Completely
sure.
different experience. And I'm really glad that I had that first because it made me think about like when you're at the school, it doesn't matter if it's AI, if it's not AI, what kind of school, like those kids kind of need to be there. Like you know that they're going to be there for the rest of the month, semester, year, whatever. They might change schools, but there's a certain thing that needs to happen once they're part of your institution. And if you're doing corporate training, like and you're doing like a training to managers and the manager thinks that whatever you're doing it just doesn't work, like they'll get up and leave. I've
Yeah,
seen that happen, fortunately not to me, but I've seen that happen. And so immediately you think about, okay, so I have all of these knowledge, which is great, but I need to think about the practical uses that these people are going to take from this. I need to make sure that I'm giving them examples that completely resonate with what they're doing in their day-to-day lives. I need to provide an emotional journey throughout the overall experience. And I feel like once I shifted between teaching adults in these big companies to teaching kids in a classroom, there was still that mindset of I need to design all of this. I need to make sure that they're engaged. I need to build this relationship with students, and I feel like the capacity to and I'm not saying that I do that extremely well. I feel like I do that fairly well, but there's always room to improve. But the capacity for educators to have that in mind and just build this experience that really makes the students learn and also feel connected with the material, feel connected with each other, feel connected with the person that's teaching or with the person that's in there helping the educational journey. I feel like it's going to be an extremely important thing for the educators of the future.
definitely. And just as a matter of timeless pedagogical principle, your students should choose to be with you, and even if they're not choosing to be with you in learning, it should be functionally as if they are, right? Like your students' preference, like a 6-year-old can't necessarily decide, everywhere that they're going to be during the day, like an adult can. But they should if they had a
Want
choice,
to
they
be
should
there.
be choosing
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
and that is, at Alpha and GT and the kind of 2 hour learning network, I think that there is like we operationalize that as like 50% of the students on any given student survey, at least 50% of the students on any given student survey should say that they would rather be at school than go on a vacation. And that
yeah,
like that's the bar, and like educators are held accountable to that. Like it has to be
yeah.
that motivating and that engaging. But for sure, and that is extremely atypical. So I mean the modal student experience at school is very very far from highly motivated, and that's just it's just we all take that for granted, but it's just worth saying that like if you're an educator getting into the space and you are good at motivating people, you are good at motivating students to learn, like mean, you have a talent, you have a capacity that is, you have a skill set that is like extremely needed and extremely lacking. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's important.
Yeah, I would just add that one of the things, like, I feel like one of the things that is not, I think that a lot of people take for granted, and that's not the case, is that as an educator, this is only my view, but I feel like you need to really love the people that you have in front of you. And what I mean love is like you need to be actively interested in their worldview, in understanding them, into like consider what they're saying as, as important and as meaningful. And I feel like especially when it comes to public school, at least like in Portugal and from what I've heard in other countries, like a lot of times that's just not the case. And like because you need to I was always telling I was being interviewed by a couple of people in last week, and they were mentioning like, well, what's one of the talents that you feel like you have? And I was telling them like one of the things that I really enjoy is I love high schoolers. Like we were talking before
Yeah,
for that. Like I believe high schoolers are the key to a modern golden age, and I feel like I could teach middle schoolers, I could teach university students. It wouldn't be the same. And there's a sense of those people that I really enjoy. And like last year, like brain rot was a thing, and a lot of high schoolers were focusing on brain rot. And so I would spend every single day a couple of minutes understanding the references and understanding the words, and then I
yeah,
would
yeah.
try to introduce that in there. And I feel like we need more people in education that also have that desire to really want to understand the students that they have in front of them and provide them a great learning experience in order for them to grow and achieve their potential.
Yeah, I mean, three quick tangents on that, or riffs on that. One, I totally agree. One is different teachers often have different age ranges that they naturally attune to and that they
Yeah.
find that they love. And sometimes like they don't know what it's going to be out of their career. Like they start off as a preschool teacher and then they end up as a middle school teacher, or they like,
Yeah.
start off as a fifth grade teacher and then find that they really love the second graders. I like if you're an educator, I would encourage you to kind of follow those threads and explore them. Like you might end up somewhere
Mm-hmm.
different than where you thought, and you might end up a lot happier and more effective for that reason. The second is that I mean the flip side of what you're saying is that I mean I've done a lot of teacher interviews and a lot of acquisitions, and I've just been a lot of observations. I've been in the education space for a while. There are
Mm-hmm.
teachers that hate children. I am sad to report.
Yeah.
And it's really bad when it happens. It's really destructive. I mean, it would be better for the children to be getting nothing than to be in those classrooms. They don't beat them necessarily. Like, I mean, that's
Yeah.
not what I'm talking about, but there's a kind of cynicism about children, or just like a lack of respect for like, well, like, I mean, and it can take various forms. It can be like, you know, like something's wrong with parents these days, or like these kids are so privileged, like they're already spoiled to death. They don't know how good they have it. There's no point anymore. Or like there's a million ways this can happen,
Yes.
and it's not good. So that like teachers need that humanism too. They need to believe in children. And then the last thing is, I think part of what it means to love children, and I'm getting this from Montessori, but it's something that I think all educators should hold, is you have to believe in human potential. Like you have to believe that your children are capable.
Mm,
And often, like our societal expectations for children are so low, and by children that could mean
yeah.
teenagers, that could mean little kids.
Yeah.
They can always do so much more than like if you're a good teacher, chances are you believe in your students more than their parents do. Which isn't to say that their parents don't love them and don't believe in them. It's just like that's everything from like I believe that this child can like make this 5-year-old can like make waffles by herself, to like in the right environment and prepared enough and can be really independent and can do all sorts of things, to like I mean there's this thing at I mean GT and Alpha get really good students, and like they tend to like the teachers tend to be like you can ace your standardized tests like the Texas Star, or
Mm-hmm.
you can get higher in the SAT. And sometimes the parents are like, "Stop pushing my kid! Like they can't do that." And the teachers are like, "They can absolutely do it! Like
Yeah.
it's not that hard, and they're not even operating. Your child isn't operating at anywhere near their capacity when they're taking this test, and we're just going to work on it, and it's going to be fine." And that, I mean, it comes up in all sorts of ways, but just I mean, to love is to understand and to believe in, and like at the end of the day, like as a teacher, if you're loving your students, like you see that they can do great things, and that is not easy. It's easy to feel affection for students if you're a good teacher. It's not
Yeah.
always easy to like really believe that like they can just exceed your expectations, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally I get that. And yeah, well, I'm just happy to be part of, and I'm always happy when I find people that are like that, that really believe in students' potential, and that when we say that, these students can change the world, we're not just saying that because it's a beautiful sentence. We're saying that because we truly believe it. Uh, yeah, and once again, like we go back to the principle of, I truly believe that high schoolers will be the key to a modern golden age, and there's a future that's bright for humanity, that starts with us providing a very good learning experience for our high schools. And it doesn't matter if, like, there's a bunch of different schools and alternatives that you could follow in order to do that, but I feel like all of them should be connected by this idea of, let's make sure that all of our students have the best learning experiences possible and go out and transform the world and have a positive impact in humanity as a whole. Um, Matt, thank you so much for taking the
Cheers,
time.
yeah.
I want to be mindful of that. So, what my last question is: if people want to reach out to you, if they want to read about you or read your stuff, like, where can they can do so?
So I keep a personal website, mattbateman.xyz, and there is a writing section of the website, that writing and other writing, etc., that includes every single thing that I've written on the public internet, and every single podcast that I've done. I'm sure I will upload this, and I keep it pretty up to date. And then, yeah, I tweet a lot at mbateman. I'm very, very active on Twitter. I've also been tweeting a lot since I've taken this job under the handle at GTDad. So check me out there. There's a lot of educational content now that I'm putting there. Yeah, that's where to
Beautiful.
find me.
Awesome. Matt, thank you so much for doing this. Everyone, you can go and follow Matt, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was a blast.